always been one of my dreams.
Growing up, I liked science a lot. So I was into physical therapy up until high school.
My parents, they gave me an operation set, the toy. Spent hours, playing with that whole set.
Wasn't one of those kids that had that operation game. There are no doctors in my family.
There was a period of 2 years that we lived in a small trailer without electricity or running water, So that's what created the interest in becoming a doctor, was being able to intervene.
By becoming a doctor, I'd be able to impact more change in communities similar to back home in Jamaica and also in Brooklyn where I live.
I knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was 6, so it's like, okay, I'm going to medical school, but how am I going to pay for it? How am I going to do this? I just went to college on scholarship, and now I'm going to get into a mountain load of debt just trying to continue that dream.
I did some Google searching, and I read about this scholarship opportunity to study medicine in Cuba, and it was like, Cuba.
Someone was like, oh, you should look into this program about studying in Cuba.
And I said, that is insane. That's absolutely crazy.
I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? That's the best, medical system in the world. Like, they train the best doctors.
And then 3 days later, I applied.
And I found out about ELAM, and I said, you know what? This is it.
Cuba is known for this community-based practice of medicine.
Lo que hoy se pide por la Organización Mundial de la Salud, de que todos los seres humanos deben recibir asistencia médica, pues desde los inicios de nuestro triunfo revolucionario es una de las premisas de nuestro país.
It's really tremendous when you think about the way that Cuba approaches healthcare.
In Cuba, everything is community medicine. That is what primary care is. The doctor lives in the neighborhood that they work in, and they see patients who live in a few blocks radius of where their clinic is.
It kind of gives the people here a sense that, hey, if I need to go see my doctor, I can just go right around the corner.
The patient goes to the doctor and the doctor goes to the patient. A lot of times you would have physicians in the neighborhood to make house calls, especially after a baby's been born. They would come to the house and see if everything is set.
Every doctor knows off the top of their hand statistics about their patient population. I have 100 asthmatics, and of those, 93 of them are controlled. One of them had an exacerbation yesterday, so we have to see. Or, I noticed a lot of the teenagers are getting chlamydia in my area, so we really need to, do something about that. Maybe we'll have some educational talks.
There are doctors in communities that know as many as 200-300 patients in their neighborhood and can provide home visits. There are polyclinics, so that if there's a need for some kind of medical attention, that would be the next level of care. And then of course there's a hospital. Here in the U.S., too often when people who don't have resources become ill, the only option they have is the emergency room.
Here's a country who has these different shortages, but they're still able to have really good health indicators, some better than the U.S.
La promoción y la prevención es lo más importante. La medicina curativa, la rehabilitación se encarece muchísimo más.
La prevención en salud pública es lo primordial. Realmente si evitamos que ocurran enfermedades tanto infecciosas como no infecciosas, estamos recuperando la salud de un país y propiciando que el pueblo esté más feliz.
In Cuba, they export doctors. Too often here in the U.S., we export soldiers.
El mundo nos conoce a través de nuestros médicos y técnicos de la salud. Incluyen varios programas. Está el Programa Integral de Salud que Cuba desarrolla desde el año 1998 en América Latina, el Caribe, África y también Asia. Incluye el programa de la Operación Milagro, que no solo lo desarrollamos en Venezuela. Hoy tenemos más de 50 centros oftalmológicos en prácticamente toda América Latina.
Donde se encuentran en estos momentos más de 60 brigadas médicas cubanas brindando la continuidad de los principios y de la ética de nuestra revolución.
Cuba's commitment to global health is tremendous. And you've seen it, time after time, crisis after crisis in countless countries. In Nicaragua and El Salvador and Mexico and various parts of Central America, there have been countless efforts to be supportive in various parts of Africa.
Cuba's role in fighting the Ebola crisis has been recognized internationally. The Henry Reeve Medical Brigade, based in Cuba and deployed to global disaster zones and epidemic outbreaks, was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize.
So it seems to be now two levels of healthcare which is very relevant for Africa and for developing countries. Primary healthcare on the one hand and emergency healthcare on the other hand.
When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, Cuba offered to send doctors.
I was in my second year of ELAM, and I can remember there were Cuban doctors prepared and ready to go to New Orleans. They were staying with us at ELAM, and they had their backpacks which were full of medications, and they were ready to go to New Orleans and serve.
Eso forma parte de que Cuba ayude al mundo, precisamente de los orígenes de nuestra revolución. De la sangre que llevamos los cubanos, de ayudar.
They know that they physically cannot put Cuban doctors everywhere, but they can train people from these countries to learn the Cuban healthcare system hands-on and to go back to their countries.
Sobre esa base, pues vamos a extenderlo a todas partes del mundo. No solamente con la prestación de los servicios de los médicos cubanos, sino también con la formación de los recursos médicos de otras partes del mundo y que luego, de formados, puedan brindar los servicios de manera gratuita con todos los valores que aprendieron acá en sus comunidades.
ELAM, the Latin American School of Medicine, was formerly a naval base located in the outskirts of Havana that was converted into a medical school by the Cuban government. When President Fidel Castro came to the United States to address the United Nations, it was really at that time that he extended this offer to provide these scholarships to young people in the U.S., with the only understanding being that when they returned home, they would practice medicine in underserved communities. In the year 2000, IFCO was leading a delegation of Congressional Black Caucus members to Cuba to learn more about the reality there. And it was then that Mississippi Congressman Benny Thompson remarked about the incredible health disparities in Mississippi.
Estamos dispuestos a conceder un número de becas.
I said, look, we are willing to grant a number of scholarships
para jóvenes
for youth
pobres de su distrito
youth from your districts
que no puedan pagar los $200,000 que cuesta una carrera universitaria.
When Fidel Castro initially made the offer, it was of course seen as a wonderful gift, but I think that there were really many people who didn't believe that it was possible. It was my father, the late Reverend Lucius Walker, who was the executive director of IFCO at the time, who believed that this was indeed something that could be done. And it was through his efforts that IFCO actually developed a process for recruiting, mentoring, and nurturing these students throughout their 6 to 7 year medical school training.
Lucio era un hombre preocupado por todo, ¿me entiendes? Entonces, esa gente para uno tiene un valor tremendo porque te enseñan a cómo conducirte, a cómo comportarte con el prójimo. Por eso uno admira tanto a Fidel, a Lucio.
And he did this because he really recognized the value that this program would offer not only U.S. communities, but the young people who would become these doctors, many of them young people of color.
Thanks to Reverend Lucius Walker for opening that door and fostering that relationship and defining solidarity.
The students we have brought
Los estudiantes que hemos traído
come not only to study medicine,
vienen no solo para estudiar medicina,
but to learn from Cuba,
sino también para aprender de Cuba
how to build a better world.
IFCO is a grassroots community organization. We travel to Cuba in a challenge to the U.S. blockade of Cuba to deliver humanitarian aid. We're the sole U.S. organization to recruit and to facilitate the medical scholarships that Cuba offers to U.S. students.
There was a written application that we had to complete. We also had to complete a certain amount of years of college-level science courses. And we had to demonstrate that we really would want to work in underserved communities and give back. After the written application, then there was an interview process. I was interviewed by various doctors, social workers, different types of people that were interviewing just to see what kind of person you were, if you were someone that was into doing volunteer work, that was into giving back. After we had the interview process, then we had an orientation, which was a wonderful experience. To this day, I still remember my orientation. We had different activities that really built collective responsibility. Representatives from Interreligious Foundation for Community Organization were observing and seeing how we would work together. They really wanted to make sure that we would be prepared for the Cuban experience.
We got to Cuba. Our first experiences there were awesome. I got off the plane to be greeted by so many welcoming people. And I just remember thinking to myself, this place is home, because I tell everybody, like, Cuba is Black Harlem speaking Spanish. I got there and I was like, oh my God, this is my people. These are my people. You look like my aunt, you look like my uncle, you look like my mom.
When I got to ELAM, it was a totally different experience about how they approached education.
It's modeled more closely to the European system, so you have longer training. It's 6 years as opposed to 4, and you spend more time doing clinical rotations as a result of that, and more time at the bedside.
When I started my medical program there were 54 plus countries represented, medical students. Students from South America, Central America, from Africa, from the Pacific Islands, from the Caribbean islands.
Congo, Nigeria, South Africa, Paraguay, Chile.
Just all over the globe.
We speak different languages, so at the same time, we all have to learn, Spanish. This is exactly how we communicate and how we learn here. We start off our pre-med year with the basic sciences in Spanish, of course. First year, we have morphology courses. So we have our morpho courses. We have our integrated medicine course.
The second year of medical school here at ELAM is composed of your anatomy, pathology, physiology, microbiology, and genetics class.
Also the psychological component, the social components that affect health in a very concrete manner.
There's one thing that Cuba taught us. They would always say that medicine is biopsychosocial. So it's biological, it's psychological, and it's social. It's not just based on the human body and that's it. That's not the only thing you focus on. You focus on what's going on mentally with the patient, and you focus on what's going on socially, what's going on around them in their household and their community that could be affecting their health.
It's a lot of studying, day-to-day studying. We have a lot of homework. It's medical school.
So it's been going very well. It's intense. Because of the volume of material.
Academically, it's been both very challenging, but also very motivating and very exciting.
The 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6 years, you spend a great deal of time at the bedside.
Here it's very, very clinical. you know, you're with the patient. One of the key things that they teach you is to make contact with the patient. Let the patient know that you are a human being and that they are a human being and not just a sickness.
I think the highlight of studying medicine in Cuba for my family medicine rotation was being able to make those house calls. Because you actually really had a chance to put in that social aspect of healthcare and take a look at their environment and see what could be affecting their health. Because a lot of times it's something that can be prevented.
¿Cuál es la diferencia? Y lo pudiéramos comparar con el resto del mundo, de ser solidarios, ya, de ser honestos, de ser compañeristas, y es uno de los valores fundamentales que debe tener todo médico. Ya cuando se termine su formación como médico de ciencia y conciencia, debe tener estos valores para ayudar así a todos los países del resto del mundo.
There's no class ranking. That's not an issue. The idea is that everybody's going to do well. And so they have a system set up where, you know, certain students who are doing really well in the class become what they called monitors, and then they would set up study sessions for the students who weren't doing as well.
Teachers would make themselves available to us 24/7, and we would have group study where we would all, you know, get together and study.
This was, let's all, you know, do well together and like really help each other. And so it was one of the first times that I actually liked school.
At the time, there were so many things that he would begin to implement.
We plan to keep the embargo on Cuba.
And so after 3 years of going through the program, studying hard, you know, this was the goal and the dream, and we thought that it was going to exist, we got the call that, okay, you guys have to leave. And we were all going crazy, like, what is going on? What's happening? From the Cuban side, all of our teachers were like, okay, this is what we'll do. We'll put your exams in order, because we were almost about 2 or 3 weeks away from our exams. And everybody started to study and was ready to do that. And so from that end, they were like, we're going to push through it. We're going to figure out how to make this work so that you guys will finish out this year. From the IFCO side of things, you know, we began to launch a full-out scale campaign to all of our congressional members and saying, look at this program, look at what they've managed to do in the last 3 or 4 years that they've been here. Are you going to deny our students a chance to go to medical school for free and to come back and work for the underserved communities? They began to lobby around people who said, we care about this program, we want it to exist, we want them to finish. And literally, you know, almost within a few weeks short of the next following school year, Colin Powell actually decided to allow us to continue on in our studies. So we still hadn't known up until a few weeks before whether we would be returning to finish school. And we continued our studies and, you know, went all the way through. And then 2007, that year we did it, we graduated.
Recibirán sus títulos de graduado de las ciencias médicas en La Habana 1.532 estudiantes de nuestras carreras. Estados Unidos de Norteamérica con 21 y México con 17.
I also want to thank the Commander-in-Chief, Fidel Castro. This was his dream. Esto fue su sueño. Sin este sueño, no estuviéramos aquí. Without that dream, we wouldn't be here today.
We have come through some things together here in Cuba. We have come from not speaking Spanish to dominating Spanish and learning medicine in Spanish. I mean, come on, we're pretty awesome.
To all my ancestors who worked so hard for us to accomplish what we've accomplished in our lives. Y'all don't know, but I'm a little girl from the projects. There are no university students in my family. There are no doctors in my family. And I'm so happy to be here.
We're going to change the world if we so please. Si deseamos, vamos a cambiar el mundo, este mundo. And we're going to make it a better place for everyone. Vamos a hacerlo mejor lugar para todo el mundo.
All medical school graduates, whether they graduate from U.S. programs or international programs, must take a series of tests known as the U.S. Medical Licensing Examination.
I was very, very lucky. I found a tutor, another student and he prepared me for English-speaking tests in Spanish.
Start studying for the tests as soon as you can and try to take them as you go. I think some people wait till the end of the med school to take all the tests, and that is a big burden, and it's going to kind of delay being able to apply for the match.
It's really incredible to see that essentially after 10 years that there are well over 100 U.S. graduates of this program.
And they are currently now serving in those underserved communities throughout New York City, California, New Mexico, Mississippi, and several other regions in the U.S. And that's unheard of because here in the States, as she mentioned before, we don't have many doctors of color that are in poor communities.
Based on my training in Cuba, I could go anywhere in the world, wherever the calling, wherever the need is. If there's a disaster, wherever, I know that I can participate and be effective.
There's so many benefits to going to medical school in Cuba, the language and the fact that it's a scholarship program and how that allows me to be free at this point in my career to kind of do whatever I want without having to worry about loans.
Being debt-free, I'm truly able to help and be in communities or be in hospitals or be in areas where I am needed the most.
One example is right here in New York City at the Wyckoff Heights Medical Center in Brooklyn.
We are in the middle of a underserved community. In the Brooklyn population, we see a very high rate of hypertension, diabetes, heart conditions, asthma.
This was a hospital that was in a community where the needs were tremendous. And this was a hospital where the chief medical officer really pursued us.
The ELAM graduates, without exception, have a philosophical sense of mission to provide care to the most disadvantaged.
It's very challenging because it is in an underserved community, but I learned so much. I'm so thankful to the patients, and I feel very connected with the community. My mother's from Brooklyn, New York, and I've had family members who have actually gone to Wyckoff hospitals. Spanish does come in handy. I speak Spanish 85% of the time that I'm at work. I speak lots of Spanish.
They are well educated. They come out, they're able to pass their exams, they're able to get into U.S. residency programs. In the residency programs I was able to directly interview, gave rave reviews about the students from ELAM that have gone through their residency programs. They described them as mature, professional, dedicated, culturally sensitive, having Spanish fluency, and really devoted to primary care.
There's a very skewed way in which medical care is paid for in the U.S. Medical care is remunerated based on procedures. So if you are some very specialized person who does this tiny operation in the retina, you get a lot of money paid for each procedure that you do. And maybe you can do 10 of those procedures in an hour. Next. If you are a family practitioner and you spend 40 minutes with a 93-year-old lady who has 15 medical problems and 15 social problems, you get paid almost nothing.
The U.S. is having a deficit in doctors, and that deficit in doctors is mostly in primary care. So your family medicine, your pediatrics, your internal medicine.
Only about 5% of U.S. medical students go into primary care, 5%. That's incredibly low. It's a good living, but it may not be as high paying as some of these other specialties.
And I'm glad that I am able to be one of those physicians that can step in and be a primary care physician and fill in that gap.
I would love to go back to Newark and practice. There are a lot of diseases that are preventable. And they show up, they present later on down the line, and that's when most of the people will come to see the doctor. And I'm hoping that because I am from the community, I resemble a lot of the people in the community, that people will feel comfortable coming to me as a doctor, and earlier rather than later.
I'm interested in going back home, but I'm also interested in going wherever I'm needed.
So since I finished my residency last year, I've been part of a global health fellowship working essentially with medical students at the College of Medicine in Malawi. I was one of a group of family doctors who essentially accompanied and taught the family medicine rotation in a rural hospital. To work with the medical students there was incredibly empowering and humbling, because these were the only medical students in the entire country.
I'm getting ready to start residency in the next couple of weeks here in Chicago. My hospital is a county hospital. Like any county hospital across the country, it takes care of the uninsured, or the underserved community.
I'll be starting a job actually in another residency program as a faculty member there. So in my position as a faculty member, I'll be able to teach some of the things that I learned in Cuba to American grads also.
And I think bringing that psychosocial, the biological, psychological, and social aspect from Cuba to the U.S. will definitely be essential to this preventative medicine, community medicine tie-in that we're trying to do here in the U.S. and incorporate that into our U.S. health system.
It's our hope that as these young doctors return to the United States and are in positions of power, that they will help to revolutionize the approach to health in the United States.
We can form different communities of doctors that can impact that and change the medicine in the U.S., where people actually see us going into communities.
We can't wait for people to come see us. We have to go out and find out who's sick, and we have to treat them. And it's gonna take all of us to do it. And it's hard. This is a hard road. But we all have to bond together, and we really must go out and find, who needs help. That's our responsibility. When I was in Cuba, we didn't wait for patients. We knocked on people's doors. Are you sick? And you'd be surprised how many people we found doing that might have gone below the radar.
You should think about, what do you want in life? Is your life about making money, or is your life about trying to do good and to leave a mark on this world that can make it a better place? And I think if you have that in your heart, take a chance on Cuba.
Those who want to apply to the program, please apply. Don't be afraid.
I'm glad that I can be one of those individuals that has paved the way and let more Americans and more American programs know about ELAM and see that, hey, we're residency ready. We're doctor ready to come back to our country and serve our communities.
We're seeing the fruits of this labor. We're seeing these incredible, committed doctors, really pursuing their dreams and providing the care that's so urgently needed in communities across the U.S.
There is a new army of doctors coming that want to change the scope of medicine.
South Bronx. Yo, grito viva Fidel en el nombre del Mir y de Miguel. Yo sigo pa'lante hasta siempre comandante, con mis rimas y mi arte participo con mi parte. Internacional, un chileno en el Yuma. International, Angola, junto a Cuba. Revolutionaries up in Harlem, meeting Malcolm. Bay of Pigs invasion, man, we all know the outcome. Building with Mandela, building with Allende. Anticapitalista, el pueblo pobre está presente. I'm worldwide, like a Cuban doctor. Revolution is the only option.
Lo que les duele a ellos y les parece extraño es que una isla por más de 50 años siga de pie y no se deje intimidar, sin importarle el bloqueo ni la amenaza imperial. Los soviéticos se fueron, es verdad, Y ante el bloqueo y la necesidad, nos levantamos de aquella realidad, con poco material pero con mucha dignidad. Mi respeto para aquellos 5 hermanos, mi respeto para los médicos cubanos, mi respeto para el que nunca se dejó vender ni traicionó esta patria de Fidel. Orgullo tengo de la patria en que nací.
What was the cost of it?
Oh, of the school?
Of going to the school?
No, the scholarship is free. It covers everything, including housing in the dorm. If you want to live off campus, that's on you. But housing in the dorm, food, books, everything. It's completely covers everything. The 200, what they were talking about was it costs $200,000 on average to go to college in the U.S. Right, and it now costs about $350,000 to go to medical school. That's not including your books, your interests. That's where I got the $1 million figure. After doing some research, I found out by the time you pay off those, those loans and everything.
But we were at the University of Michigan living in family housing.
Yeah.
And we were grad students, and the medical students who were there past their degree and maybe doing residency there. But I think they had to do residency somewhere besides the University of Michigan. But anyway, most of those students came out of, especially if they had families and kids, they came out of med school with about $200,000 of credit card debt, not counting student loans. And then the credit card debt, I think you could count on, that could take the rest of your life and you'll never get the balance down anyway.
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of, now student loan debt, you can't, it's not like you can default on it like you used to be able to. It goes into the grade, right? So yeah, it's a huge cost, and that's why a lot of medical students end up going into specialties because they have to, right? I mean, being a primary care doctor pays pretty well, it's $100,000. That's not bad. But if you have that much debt, then you need to make even more to be able to pay off the debt. So that's why that's part of the reason why we don't have the amount of primary care doctors that we need in the U.S.
Jennifer, I think the place in the movie where $200 was talked about isn't that the cost of the exams that U.S. students have to graduate in ELAM, have to pay to take the tests that they have to take to be certified in this country?
No, that's actually, again, that was from Fidel's speech in 2000 when he spoke to Riverside, and he was saying, look, I'll give you guys, Cuba will open up this scholarship program for students in the U.S. because we know a lot of you guys can't afford to go to medical school in the U.S. because it's so expensive. So that's where that figure, it's actually, I think it got cut off a little bit. It should be 200,000. But yeah, that's what it is. But the tests themselves are actually pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Even Darna Banks from Texas, she was saying that even just to take the MCAT, which is the test to be able to get into U.S. medical school, that was like over $1,000, right? And she could afford it. And she applied for a scholarship from the institute that administers the test, and they said, well, if you can't afford the test fee, then probably you're not going to be able to afford medical school. So that's what they said to an African American student in Texas, right, from Dallas. So that's what the licensing exam folks or the MCAT folks told a young student who wanted to become a doctor. So you can see what people are up against when they want to become doctors in this country. So, not to say it's impossible, obviously. There's probably several doctors in here tonight. But it's a lot. So Cuba recognized that and realized that it's not just a lot for folks in the U.S., it's a lot for poor people all across the globe. So that's why they opened up the med school program to the whole world.
Yeah, I'm just curious, were there any language requirements to get in? Like, how are they navigating with zero Spanish, taking graduate level courses? I mean, that seems really difficult.
And I'm sure Sol can kick in here, but that's why they actually expanded the program from 6 years to 7 years. So that first year, they learned just Spanish. Okay. So it's not a requirement that you know Spanish, but you are, I'm sure it helps, but you learn Spanish in that year, and specifically you learn scientific Spanish or medical Spanish, but I'm sure you could talk more about that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Like, you have students coming from all over the world, and a majority of them don't speak any Spanish at all. Like, they'll just speak Arabic, for example. And they come, and it's just a rapid immersion program, and you just get a year. The first 4 months are just Spanish language, and then after that you start taking these, we would consider like pre-med classes, where it's just basic biology, organic chemistry, physics, and that kind of leads the way into, it's great because it teaches you Spanish, but it also teaches you their education system, which is like very different from what I was used to here, and what I think is very different from anywhere in the world. And so you get that year to figure things out and find your footing.
I was just wondering what it was like for you personally to go to a school with all these people from all of these countries, with all these different cultural habits and customs and things. Was it really exciting, or did you have strange little mistakes that you made that you'll never forget? I was just wondering what that's like for an American you're in your 3rd year. It means you've jumped over several steps now. You're on your way to being a doctor. And what's going to stand out for you when you come back?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about it earlier, like the diversity there. It's difficult, but that's one of my favorite parts about the ELAM project. There's so many cultures. Like, I don't know if there's anywhere in the world that's so incredibly rich in diversity. And I lived on campus the first year, pre-med, in the dorms, and then I moved out after that just because it's difficult. But no, a lot of my roommates were from Chad, I remember. It was Americans and Chadians and some students from the Bahamas. And one thing that sticks out in my mind was I didn't know, coming from this area, I didn't know any Muslims, and a lot of the students from Chad are Muslim. And so I remember it was like 5 a.m. and I was asleep one morning. And one of them started, the guy next to me, his name was Broadening. Yeah, he started praying out loud, and I woke up and I said, "Can you please be quiet?" And he stopped. But then I went back to sleep, and then I heard him start again, and I woke up, "Hey, be quiet." And I learned the next day, it turned into kind of a little bit of a culture clash, I guess, you know. And I learned the next day, after some of them came and talked to me very nicely and respectfully, like, you're not supposed to interrupt them at that point. And it was great, because I learned that, and now some of my best friends from there are like Palestinians and from Chad. And so you just have those kind of like little, brushes like every once in a while, and then you're corrected. And it adds to the whole education process, like in becoming a doctor, because then I can come back here or wherever I'm going to go to practice medicine, and I know how to have those kind of interactions and be respectful. And I think that's a big part of medicine, that you can relate and empathize and work with a larger population, with just about anybody.
Thank you.
So, have you decided where you're going to practice medicine when you're done, or you're not thinking that far ahead?
Definitely here. Like I think it was demonstrated in the video, is to go back to the community you're from. So for me, Western Washington, I love this area, and I definitely want to come back here and practice medicine. In Seattle, it's a very wealthy area, but there's so many small pockets, or not even small pockets, but there's so many pockets of communities in this area that really are lacking basic health care. And so I would be more than happy to come back here, and I definitely will be coming back here to practice.
Did you finish a 4-year degree at the university before you went?
Yeah.
And then how old were you when you decided to apply?
27.
You were 27
yeah,
when you
I was
decided?
26 when I decided, and then I got into the program when I was 20.
And now, isn't there an age limitation?
Yes, that was put in place the year after I got in. Sorry, just snuck by. It used to be for Americans, they let us come up until the age of 35, and I think that was partly because the other countries don't have to do the pre-med coursework like we have to, which is usually a 4-year program. Generally, you can kind of shorten it.
Okay.
But they changed it to 25 now.
And did you take the MCAT?
No.
Thank you.
If you knew about it, like, did you know about it before you got your 4-year degree or after? Or do you wish that you knew about it earlier? I mean,
my dad told me about it when I, in a book that he gave me when I was studying at the University of Washington. I knew about it when I was studying in college.
Yeah.
That's when I first heard about it. Yeah. And like I had mentioned, I'm a political science major, but I was taking pre-med courses, and so I went through the system here. Like, you kind of learn that politics, they're so dirty, and you don't, they don't mix with medicine. You want to keep it sort of thing. But that's the exact opposite from what we learned in Cuba. It's that politics really influence absolutely everything, and they have everything to do with each other. And so I like it because I'm able to combine, my political science degree.
And as the politics doesn't impact medicine in the United States, I mean, it's just like a dirty business. Well, and just for an FYI, a lot of Medicare dollars go to pay for training of doctors in the U.S. The University of Washington is one of the top 3 every year as far as dollars that they get for full-time equivalents who are training in the university hospital, interns, residents, even fellowships after who are doing, in their 12th year of a fellowship, they will be considered a percentage of a FTE to get dollars through Department of Health and Human Services. A lot of money.
Dental health isn't really addressed in this country, and you only see a dentist if you have the money to afford it. How does Cuba relate to the question of dental health, and is that part of the program, or do they do preventive medicine, or, to me, dental care is very important to your overall health, and wealth there.
I can say that Cuba does have extensive dental health programs, so they do produce a lot of dentists through the healthcare system and through their medical education system, and they do actually have a lot of people from other countries, again, some on scholarship, some not, some pay tuition, that study to become dentists in their dental schools as well. But I don't know about ELAM specifically. But.
We don't learn, they have separate dental schools, and I don't exactly, it sounds like you probably know more about them than I do. But it is, we learn that it is part of the basic healthcare system, and everybody has access to dentists.
And if I can be the annoying just observer, I was in Cuba 2 years ago, and I'm an observant person, I'm in healthcare, and we were in Western Cuba, which is like Virginia, Hawaii, and Iowa combined. It is not the metropolitan part of Cuba. And the thing that jumped out at me is you never saw anybody with bad teeth, and everybody had glasses. They may not be the latest frames, but like here, I was just like, here, you don't have to go throw a rock very far to see bad teeth. And in Cuba, I was like, everybody had good teeth, and they all had glasses, which is basic good health.
Yeah.
I've heard that they are not doing the international scholarships. Like the first 10 years, they were doing the international scholarships, and the United States are the only people that are getting scholarships. Is that not true?
They still are, but they scaled it.
They scaled it back. Okay.
Yeah.
A bit, yeah, but they're still and it's shifted depending on which countries they've developed relationships. So they've developed a number of relationships with various African countries, like I mentioned. So there's about 3,000 doctors or students from South Africa. They have an agreement with the South African government that they'll graduate a certain number of doctors to go back to South Africa. I think it was like 2,000 from Angola. I think about 1,000 from Namibia. So definitely Southern Africa is a big source of students. They graduated about 1,000 doctors from East Timor, which that got its independence from Indonesia. Before that, there were no doctors in East Timor, so now they got 1,000, and I think the last of the 1,000 have gone back now to practice, and they're setting up the first medical school in East Timor. So yeah, it has scaled back some, but it's like new countries come into the mix as they develop those relationships.
So is it that the South African government, for example, I'm just trying to figure out how it works because it just seems, I'm worried about Cuba getting, sucked up into the profit system, as they open up more. And if they stop doing so much scholarships internationally, I imagine that it's going to be sort of more privileged. Of course, it's going to be more privileged people if you don't have a scholarship, and how that impacts the medical school, especially when it's such a huge population in Cuba. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts about that, Sol. Or I may completely not understand what's going on anyway, though.
Well, I mean, historically, they, when the revolution happened, right, in 1959, they started to institute essentially a single-payer system in 1960, 1961, right? It took a while. So when that happened, they had about 6,000 doctors in Cuba. Half decided to leave because, they didn't want to do a single-payer system. So they looked around and said, okay, we don't have enough doctors now. We didn't before, but now we really don't have enough doctors. So we got to figure out a way to train doctors. So they did. They developed a very extensive medical system, health training system. So you have medical schools in almost all of the provinces. And then they also developed they got so good at it that they started to offer scholarships to other countries. So those scholarships, that medical cooperation has existed since 1960 when they sent health brigades to Chile, right? Like that's been an ongoing, it's something that really did begin with the revolution and has been ongoing, both to send Cuban doctors but also to receive students from around the world to train. So I don't see that changing too much. I mean, you're there, so you might have a better understanding of that, but what do you think?
I know they're going to continue scholarships like for U.S. students. I think we have 500 spots allotted to us, right? And we've used about half of those. And they've promised us that they're going to continue that. And there's other countries that they're going to continue, like Palestine, Western Sahara, some Caribbean countries, South Pacific. But they have moved more towards, like you had mentioned, like South Africa, Angola, Chad, and those countries. They're paying for the education, and part of that is it's great that they were able to provide so many scholarships in the past, and they still provide quite a few scholarships, but it is so expensive. So I think they've moved towards this system, which helps keep the whole thing going. Yeah. And they take the Angola, South Africa. Those are countries that their governments can't afford. They're able to pay to have their students.
So they're government-to-government things. It's not like a private.
Yeah,
that's what I was
So that does make it really different.
Yeah.
South Africa pays for the education.
Exactly.
These students aren't paying out of their own pocket. I don't think.
Yeah. Otherwise, they just go to school in South Africa.
Or school in Harvard.
Can I just add in that the United States is unique in this regard, in that the organisation that recruits students is a non-governmental organisation, IFCO. Everywhere else in the world, Cuba relates to the government of the country. The government of the country, whether it's South Africa or Mexico or Brazil, is responsible for recruiting the students who go to IFCO.
So if a high school kid wanted to plan his or her future, hoping to get into the school, and they're from the U.S., they'd have to do the 4-year undergrad first, right?
No. The requirement is basic college sciences. So you need your chemistry, your bio, and your physics. So that's why John was saying that actually the perfect prep work is a 2-year degree from a community college or from an AS. A lot of the students do already have 4-year degrees, but that's not a prerequisite. It's just that you have those basic college courses. So we actually have some, I think there's a couple students too that have a high school degree, but they went to community college because it's cheaper, and took the basic sciences and then went in. So yeah, so it's not, you don't have to have a 4-year. A lot do, just because that gives you the basic sciences.
I have extended family in Canada and Iran, and I was just wondering about those. I mean, I don't even know if my nieces or nephews would be
Oh, in Canada?
Interested, but I just wonder what the relation, if you know what the relation.
I think there's some reps from some Native American communities, like a couple, not a lot, but yeah.
From where? From
Canada. I don't know which ones, but yeah. But it's not that much, right?
No. I've met Canadians studying there, but they're not with the ELAM project. They pay to go there instead.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, they go to a separate school.
So what about Iran? Noting students from there?
I've never met anyone from Iran. But I
Iran actually has a great medical. They have a really good medical school. So.
Yeah, I mean they don't focus on countries like no European countries are represented at all of it because they have good systems. Yeah, or relatively good systems.
How long are you obligated to come back home to work before you can move out and move somewhere else?
Oh, we're not obligated.
Well, they're recommending you go back, go back to your own town or to the area to work. But how soon can you move out and somewhere else within another state?
Whenever there's no like contract or anything. So there have been some students, not many, but I can only think of one, who have gone abroad and worked after graduating.
You saw at the end of the film, the list, that's not the entire list, but it's a good chunk of the residencies, the different residencies where students go. So a lot of times, you may or may not be able to get your residency, especially say you want to do pediatrics, right? That be a primary care physician for children. You may not be able to get a residency in your hometown, so you may go somewhere. So Darna Banks, for example, from Dallas, Texas, who's doing her residency in Chicago, but she's very clear. She loves Dallas, and she wants to go back. So that's the ultimate goal, that you go back to your community. But that's expansive.
They have part of the program is they have us do projects about where we're from, like to learn more. So it's like we're learning constantly about where we're from, like each of the students from. Like learn more about the communities they're coming from and do reports about those communities. And for U.S. students, pretty much all of us go home for the summer and then try to do observerships or rotations or anything like that, just to learn more about the system and where we're from, because it's so different here, So it helped with the transition for when we're done.
Do you know what percentage of people? I mean, I know at the beginning it was pretty difficult to get a residency, but it's getting quite a bit better. What percentage of people do successfully complete residency? Who match? I mean, I suppose everybody pretty much.
Graduation rates, I don't know the exact percentage, but I know it's much higher than actually U.S. graduation rates for U.S. medical schools. For matches, it's in the later years, it's been almost like 90%. I mean, it's 100% depending on the size of the class. This year we just had 25 graduates. It was a pretty big class. So yeah, in later years, the first years, it was kind of like, okay, how do we do this, right?
Yeah, because it's a main system that does not want to have anybody who went to medical school, anywhere else.
Exactly.
And so it's made
it's very different.
Fail.
Yeah, it's very different.
And that's even if you don't even count the whole embargo.
Yeah, and even for international students, period, if you go and study it outside, it's harder for those coming back into the U.S. system. So the first years, it took a while, but in the last 10 years, like I said, it's up to 90%, up to 100%, depending on which class you look at.
That's great.
People are very highly motivated, and now we also have a network of support where people have hospitals and clinics in their hometown where they can go and do observations. They have, and also now, hopefully you got from Wyckoff Heights, the CEO of Wyckoff Heights, there's a lot of ELAM grads who are working in hospitals now. So people are starting in some small way to fight over, they know that an ELAM grad is going to be community minded. They know that they're going to give 1,000%. The CEO of Wyckoff Heights was saying that we had this terrible blizzard in New York, and it was shutting down everything. And he knew that he could call the ELAM grads because they would show up. They were like the ones, the residents that were going to be there. So that I think that reputation is starting to kind of percolate out there now. So.
2 questions. One is, how many, if any, graduates from the program are actually living in Seattle? And then the second is, should we probably be targeting high school kids rather than thinking about venues at the colleges? Because like I'm thinking my daughter, she's starting high school this year. I think she's slowly opening to the idea of doing something like one of her parents, either a pastor or a physician. And so in the back of her mind, I think this would spark something, and then maybe in 2 or 3 years be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go for it.
I think high schools are good. There's some, I don't know if y'all have this, but out east we do, where there are some high schools where you can take college courses, sometimes those basic science courses in high school. Some of the high schools are more oriented towards health sciences, so that would be a great place to start. Community colleges, I mean, maybe I'm biased because I teach at community college, but those are great places because students, oftentimes who are going to community college are, coming from economically struggling communities, and, they would, hopefully be looking at this as an opportunity. So I think both of those would work great. I can't answer about Seattle though. How many ELAM folks from Seattle?
There's a woman who wasn't from Seattle called Xochitl Garcia, who was from LA, but she ended up moving to Washington. She's currently taking her US exams. She graduated a couple of years ago.
There's 2 who are younger than me who are from Seattle, but they're from, well, one's from LA, the other's from Mexico, but they both went to Western. So they now call, Seattle area their home. So, but I think I'm the first.
And we lost the other guy who's the ELAM student to Paraguay.
Oh,
right. We lost him to Paraguay because he got married to a Paraguayan.
When they're in medical school together, they fall in love and they can't go to both people's countries. So they have to make some hard choices.
Occupational hazard.